Being a middle child isn't just about birth order. We're not talking about funny stereotypes here. We're talking about what happens when you were the middle child who got treated differently, less attention, less validation, less care than your siblings. And psychologically, that specific experience leaves marks that most people don't understand. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one in your family, hit subscribe and drop a comment about your experience. Let's get into what's really happening. Here's what we need to clarify first. This isn't about all middle children. This is specifically about middle children who experience differential treatment, where the oldest got the attention for being first, the youngest got babied, and you were just there. Expected to be independent, low maintenance, easy, and when you're consistently treated as less important than your siblings during critical developmental years, it shapes your psychology in very specific ways. Here's how. First, you learn to make yourself invisible. When your needs were consistently overlooked, you adapted by needing less, or at least by appearing to need less. You became the easy child, the one who didn't ask for help, the one who figured things out alone. Not because you were naturally independent, but because you learned that asking for attention was pointless or even met with annoyance. And here's where it gets painful. This follows you into adulthood. You struggle to advocate for yourself at work. You minimize your problems in relationships. You feel guilty taking up space because your brain internalized a message. Your needs are less important than everyone else's. Psychology calls this learned invisibility, and it's a trauma response to being consistently deprioritized. You weren't born low maintenance. You were trained to be. Second effect, you developed a chronic comparison reflex. You watched your older sibling get celebrated for achievements and your younger sibling get coddled for struggles. Meanwhile, your accomplishments were expected and your struggles were dismissed. So your brain learned to constantly measure your worth against others. Am I doing enough? Am I as good as them? Why do they get that and I don't? It becomes automatic. This creates what psychologists call comparison-based self-worth. You can't just feel proud of yourself, you need to know where you rank. And it's exhausting because you're never comparing from a level playing field. You're comparing from a deficit that was created in childhood. You might even find yourself drawn to competitive environments or, oppositely, avoiding them entirely because the comparison triggers that old wound. Third, you struggle to trust that people actually care about you. When your own family treated you as less important, it taught you that relationships are unreliable, that even people who are supposed to love you unconditionally might not choose you. So now, you test people. You look for signs. They'll prioritize someone else over you. You're hypersensitive to feeling like the backup option, the afterthought, the one who gets included out of obligation. This isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition from childhood. Your brain is protecting you from re-experiencing that familiar pain of being the least important person in the room. And in romantic relationships, this can show up as anxious attachment, where you need constant reassurance that you actually matter to your partner. Fourth effect, you either overcompensate dramatically or you underperform entirely. There's rarely a middle ground, which is ironic. Some middle children become overachievers, constantly trying to prove they deserve attention. They chase success, hoping it'll finally make them visible, make them matter. Others go the opposite direction, they underperform or self-sabotage. If you were never going to be the favorite anyway, why try? This is called learned helplessness. And it's a psychological response to feeling like your efforts don't change outcomes. Both responses stem from the same wound. You didn't get to just be a kid who was valued for existing. You had to earn visibility. And that fundamentally warps your relationship with effort and achievement. And finally, you became the peacekeeper who disappears in the process. Middle children who were treated differently often became the family mediator. You smoothed over conflicts. You adapted to everyone else's moods. You made yourself smaller so everyone else could be comfortable. But here's what happens. You lose touch with your own feelings, your own opinions, your own identity. You become so focused on managing everyone else's emotions that you don't know who you are outside of that role. This shows up in adult relationships as codependency, difficulty setting, boundaries, and a tendency to merge with other people's needs while abandoning your own. You're so used to being the flexible one that you forget you're allowed to be solid too. Psychology recognizes this as identity diffusion. and it's one of the deepest effects of being the overlooked middle child. If this resonated with you, I need you to hear something. The way you were treated wasn't about your worth. It was about your parents' limitations and the dynamics they created. You deserved better. And recognizing these patterns now means you can finally give yourself what you didn't get then: attention, care, and the belief that you matter. For more psychology content like this, check out my newsletter in the description. Every week, I break down human psychology dynamics, attachment, and healing. No fluff, just real insight. You were never the problem. You were just in an impossible position.